All right, good morning, Doug. We're with questions from members of the file. First up, Donald Trump is saying that the EU only formed to rip off the US, and basically everyone in the world is ripping off the US, and this is getting a bad deal. Uh, what's your comments on this notion in particular? Um, it says Doug is saying that the US has been getting a great deal in printing and exporting US dollars and getting real products and services in return, but this is the opposite of what Trump seems to be saying.
Well, you can't, as favorably inclined as I am towards many of the things that Trump is trying to do, uh, he plays so fast and loose with the facts. The EU wasn't formed uh, to rip off the US. The EU was formed, it started to be formed back in the 50s, actually, as a European steel and coal uh, customs union, so that they could trade these industrial materials with each other. And a little bit of history, I'm just pulling it out of my memory banks. There used to be the outer seven and the inner six of companies and countries, and then they formed it. But gradually, the EU has grown and become more powerful. And further in the way of background, do you know that there are 50,000 employees of the EU in Brussels? That's a giant number of people. It's a monstrosity, not counting all the hangers-on and lawyers and God knows what else. And all these people do is gum up the works, tell the French how to make cheese and the British how to make beer. And of course, the British left the EU, but the reason that hasn't worked well is because the British, when they left the EU, kept most of the stupid institutions that were created when they were in the EU. So they're not in the EU, so they don't have that advantage, such as it is, but they have all the regulations, it's a dog's breakfast. But as far as what Trump is saying, that it was put together to rip off the US, that's absolutely insane. Because before the EU became as powerful as it is now, let's say in the last century, it's unbelievable, 25 years ago, the GDP per capita of the US and Europe was just about on par. But now the Europeans are only 70%, roughly, GDP per capita of what we have in the US. And there was a chart that I saw recently that was put together. Maybe you saw that too, where it showed in the last 25 years or whatever it was, there have been a couple $1 trillion of new companies created in the US, many, many companies, and there were only like 50 billion or some trivial amount of new companies created in Europe. So this is crazy. The Europeans have shot themselves in the foot with this stupid, and it's going to break up. It's going to break up. I mean, the fact that Ursula von der Leyen, Ursula She-Wolf of the SS, wants to raise $1 trillion to build the European military. I mean, it's just going to suck that much more capital out of the productive part of the economy. Anyway, I think it's all about the fact that Europe, the EU, charges 50% duty on American hard liquor or something like that, or whatever.
That's a recent thing, yeah, that he's been talking about. Yep.
Okay, well, sure. So he's going to say, we'll charge 200%. All right, it would be great if they both go to zero. That'd be wonderful. But it's not there to rip off the US. It's because a bunch of socialists are trying to globalize Europe. I mean, I wish he'd stop saying these things because they're just factually inaccurate. And I hate where he thinks everybody's trying to rip us off. So anyway,
Yeah. Well, he just doesn't really do the nuanced arguments around it because there is a complicated argument around, had the downside of having the reserve currency and that we've, financed our military support basically has made it so they've been able to divert their funds instead toward all their stupid social welfare programs. And so, they took advantage of our military spending essentially and used the money poorly. But, that's a more complicated argument than just saying those are the bad guys. They ripped us off. They're screwing us over. And he likes that, the simple arguments, I think.
He does like that. Anyway, my prediction, which I've predicted for many years, and it remains in force, is the EU is going to break up. It's going to fall apart for lots of reasons. And the euro, their Esperanto currency, which if the dollar's an I owe you nothing, the euro's a who owes you nothing. I mean, it's a total horrible fiat currency. That's going to break up. It's all going to fall apart. So, and that could be a good thing because maybe some of these countries will free marketize a little bit, but they're all just slip sliding into becoming a giant backwater. It'll be a petting zoo for the Chinese and a playground for the Africans and the Muslim. So, no, I'm not very optimistic about Europe. It's really a pity.
Yeah. Okay, so you're in Buenos Aires right now. So the next question is about the price changes that have happened there. It says, did the explosion in prices in Argentina comes solely from the disappearance of the spread between the blue rate and the official rate? If so, shouldn't the price increases be mostly affecting foreigners that trade into the peso from the USD? I thought inflation has mostly come down, so nominal peso prices should have remained low and therefore shouldn't affect locals that are earning their means in pesos.
Yeah, this is a problem. This is a question that I have not thought out uh, a good answer to. On the one hand, he's Malay's government, even though the deep state in Argentina is fighting him tooth and nail, much the way the deep state in the U.S. is fighting Trump's economic reforms. Same drill, with judges slowing things down and same type of thing. But he's cut a lot of the costs and cut a lot of taxes and cut lots of regulations. So I would have thought that the general price level in Argentina would have dropped. And he said he was going to abolish the central bank, which is what prints up pesos and causes inflation. He hasn't done that yet. I mean, Malay is disappointing from a number of points of view. I mean, listen, he's wonderful, but there's all kinds of problems with Malay. Shipping Argentina's gold to Europe to do what and why? That's kind of suspicious. And borrowing money from the IMF, well, I guess that would be okay if then later you defaulted on the IMF, which I think would be a good idea. Oh, no hay plata, can't pay. I mean, African countries do that all the time. So Argentina should do the same thing. Hopefully it would bankrupt the IMF, which would be good. But anyway, look, it's true that the rate of price rises, inflation in Argentina has come way down. And that's good because the average guy on the street in the past couldn't save money. The money was losing value, 10, 20%, 30% per month. So of course the little guy couldn't possibly get ahead. Well, now, if he can set a few pesos aside, hey, they'll still be worth something next month. So that's all good. But the question is why haven't retail prices fallen in Argentina? I don't have an answer so far because they're not printing up money at the rate that they were before. And they've cut regulations. There should be more production. And real capital should be flowing into Argentina, which would help things. I don't have the answer to that question. I can tell you that property prices in Argentina are solidifying, but not moving up. I mean, or maybe the cost of a meal in a restaurant in Buenos Aires has gone up a lot. But if you want to buy an apartment here in BA, they're still really cheap. So
Well, I mean, does it affect locals as much as it affects is it noticeable, do you think, the price increases to locals as they have been to dollar holders in Buenos Aires? You know, because it's,
well, all I know, look, like last night, I went to a meeting of a group that I'm a member of here in BA called the Round Table, which is 8 Brits, 8 Americans, and 8 Argentines. And of all the things that we talked about, these are all sophisticated, rich guys, basically, from these 3 countries. And none of us, nobody brought up inflation in Argentina or the economic situation here in Argentina. Everybody, hey, we live in Argentina. It's a chaotic place, but nobody was complaining about it. Even though there was a mild riot outside the Casa Rosada the day before yesterday with, the usual union people and thugs and all that raising hell for whatever reasons they were. But nobody thinks it's important. And, taking a cab around, I talked to the cab driver a little bit. Everybody seems everything's mellow. Talked to my maid here, and she thinks everything's just fine. So I don't know if I'm answering the question, but Malay's got another 3 or 4 years, and I think he'll be reelected after that. So I remain bullish on Argentina.
okay.
I mean, I don't know if that's an answer to the question.
Yeah, I think the big thing you notice, I don't talk to Argentines regularly, but the Americans that I know or the people that earn in dollars that are there, those are the people I hear complain about it. Because whereas it was so cheap for them, it no longer is at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Well, it's a time of transition. That's not an answer to the question, but all I can say is that if you're interested in Argentina, and you should be, now's a good time to buy a crib in Buenos Aires, or for that matter, buy some real estate out in the provinces.
So next question is, if the Mar-a-Lago Accord isn't anticipated to happen until toward the end of Trump's term, how do we prepare? Let me this to give us some context. The Mar-a-Lago Accord is a theoretical idea brought forward by Stephen Moran, who is a member of Trump's cabinet, one of his advisors. Actually, he's been nominated but has not been confirmed yet. And basically, they imagine a new deal with trade, a global trading system where essentially countries agreed to devalue the US dollar. So this whole premise, though, involves a huge economic dislocation or disruption or recreation of some kind from what we have now. I mean, I call it like Trump's reset is one way to think about it. And this can cause a lot of disorder. And they got to do it pretty quickly. And there are things, and certainly asking how to prepare, I think, is an important question. So in the idea, Doug, that Trump is pushing through a set of economic policies designed to reform or reset the system, what should one do?
Well, I don't have much confidence in Trump's economic vision. He's a business guy. He's a real estate developer. He's got lots of uneconomic ideas that might seem like a good idea to a New York real estate developer. But let's look at it this way. The US has a negative trade balance still of about $1 trillion a year or something on that order, where we're shipping $1 trillion outside of the country, and in return, getting all the cheap things from China and Europe and around the world that I guess they're ripping us off on. We give them fiat paper, and they rip us off, giving us real dollar, real goods. That's an interesting trade. But the downside of this is that there's 20, 30, 40 trillion dollars held by foreigners of US currency. And at some point, when people lose faith in the US dollar, which is just a fiat currency, which who knows how it's going to be managed under Trump. I think he's going to print up a lot more of it, regardless of how he cuts the costs or in the U.S. government. People are going to want to unload those dollars for real goods in the U.S. So we were talking earlier about the chances of foreign exchange controls, going back to why you should buy an apartment in BA or buy something in Argentina, which is free marketizing. It's that at some point, because of the 30 or 40 trillion dollars outside the US and the trillion-dollar trade deficit, I wouldn't doubt that Trump puts on some kind of foreign exchange controls. So you can't get money outside of the US. So you should do it now. Get your money out of the country before the government gets your money out of you. Because there is an explosion that's going to happen. And this relates to gold also. I mean, look, gold was over $3,000 today. I think it hit 3,014 today. Nobody's talking about it. The public's not involved in this at all. So I think that there's an earthquake that's building up just under the surface, with movements of gold and movements of dollars. And so anyway, what were you going to say
Something's
about
going to happen. Yeah, well, I definitely agree. And I mean, you talked before that gold is not cheap today, and it isn't. It's over $3,000 an ounce. It's almost unbelievable, actually. It took 15 months only for it to go from $2,000 to $3,000. I mean, that's extraordinary. And if you don't own some gold today, I think that you should fix that. You should definitely acquire some gold, because it seems to me, I mean, and it's clearly stated by Stephen Miron, this advisor of Trump, that they intend to devalue the dollar. They believe the dollar is too strong. And, to get rid of the debt, the only way you can do it is you can default honestly, or you can default dishonestly, right? Through inflation. And they're going to do the inflationary route. So the debt problem is only overcome by doing this. We've all known this for a long time. And also, in order to make the US, he wants to, remake America as a manufacturing powerhouse. Well, the only way that would ever work is if the dollar is substantially cheaper relative to other currencies to make the products competitive around the world. So they need the dollar. They need gold to go up. The government needs gold to go up. And I don't know if that's ever been true in my lifetime, but it is true now.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, these people that are running the government have a big problem. $37 trillion of domestic debt, plus about the same of foreign debt, dollars outside the US, which could come back and buy assets that would no longer be owned by Americans. So yeah, they want to solve this problem. And the way they think they're going to solve it is by radically devaluing the dollar. At the same time, price of gold goes up. So even though gold is reasonably priced now, I hate to buy something that's reasonably priced. I like to buy stuff that's cheap. Been saying for years to buy gold. Okay, it's happened. I think it's going to go higher as they blow up the dollar to get rid of the debt, foreign and domestic.
Okay. All right. Next question is, what's the likely outcome for Europe and Ukraine now that it looks possible that Trump may reduce U.S. involvement in NATO and Europe generally?
The answer to the question is the U.S. should not be isolationist. This is the wrong word that people use all the time inappropriately. It should be non-interventionist. That's different, okay? We're not going to isolate. We're just not going to stick our nose in other people's business. So I think that Trump is going to wind up solving the problem between Russia and the Ukraine. And what they do, it's none of our business, and I don't care. I basically come down on the Russian side of this for a lot of reasons that we don't have to go into right now. And of course, the same thing is going to come up with with China and Taiwan. Not our problem. Solve it yourself, guys, but we're not going to bankrupt the US to defend one regime or another. But wait a minute, am I answering the question or not?
Yeah, well, just wants to know what the likely outcome is for Europe and Ukraine. I mean, Europe's talked about not backing down in this, raising $1 trillion for defense spending. You know, they sound like they're as much warmongers as they've been this entire time. I mean, are they going to allow, I mean, they even talk about, they're talking about drafts again in certain European states.
Absolutely crazy. You're not going to, I don't think a draft of young Euro weenies and Euro trash is going to succeed. That's number one. I mean, number two, where are they going to get €1 trillion? I mean, they'd have to cut back on their huge welfare programs. And all those governments are really just about as bankrupt as the US government is. They just can't do that. In addition to the fact that for the last 30 years, NATO hasn't served a useful purpose. It should have been disbanded. The Soviet threat disappeared. Now, why is Europe still, why is NATO still there? I mean, today it's nothing but a ridiculous provocation to everything, and a very expensive provocation. So it should be disbanded, and I think it will be. Certainly, if I was Trump, I would withdraw from NATO. Why are we in NATO? Why are we spending all this money to provoke the Russians or anybody? It's all crazy. This is all going to come to an end, I think. That's my prediction. Or maybe we'll still wind up in World War III, because who knows? Maybe the Israelis will talk the US into attacking Iran for some reason, which makes no sense to me. But we're dealing with psychopaths, so who knows?
Doug, what are your thoughts on the recent election outcome in Uruguay? And what are your thoughts on Uruguay's future during this upcoming leadership?
Well, the last president of Uruguay, Callejo, was a decent human being and generally free market oriented. All right, now they've elected a socialist. But listen, before the previous president, the last president before that, was a guy named Pepe Mujica, who was a Montanero during the 70s. In other words, he was a violent terrorist, okay, and a dyed-in-the-wool socialist. Country didn't change at all. Look, the thing I like about Uruguay, it's a very expensive country. It's expensive because of the unbelievable VAT and import duties that they have in this country. It makes it a very expensive country to live in because of those two things. But on the bright side about Uruguay is that it's actually socially stable. It's a small country, 3.5 million people. It's an agricultural country, which is great. And it acts as a beach resort for the Argentines and like a bolt hole outside of Argentina for the Argentines. So I wouldn't worry too much. I mean, what's he going to do? Raise taxes more here in Uruguay? This is a very heavily taxed little welfare state. I like it because it's stable. It's stable. It's an agricultural country with an attached beach resort. So, but what do you think, Matt? You're probably more boots on the ground in Uruguay than I am at this point.
Well, I think it is definitely a low volatility country. It's probably one of the lowest volatility countries you can find in the world. And I don't think radical changes are difficult here because it's not in the Uruguayan disposition to do anything radical. Yeah,
Yeah, because like in Argentina, I mean, the locals in Buenos Aires will find any excuse to go into the streets and beat pots, and they want this or they don't want that from the government. That doesn't happen in Montevideo.
no. It doesn't. I mean, they try and even if like foreign groups are trying to stir up trouble, with LGBT stuff or whatever they try and do, it doesn't take, it doesn't turn anything anymore. And I think it's because it's such a small country. People, everyone knows each other or is like one removed from each other. The president does not travel with a security detail. Drives himself to work, if he supports a policy that actually negatively impacts people's lives, he's going to see those people standing in line for coffee the next morning at the coffee shop. I mean, it's like you just can't get away with stuff when you're not this like enshrined elite, that's separate from the people. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's a mellow little country. It's like Uruguay relates to Argentina the way Canada relates to the US. Canadians have always been viewed as kind of mellow and nonviolent. It kind of relates the way New Zealand relates to Australia. Uh, you know, non nonviolent, mellow Kiwis relative to Aussies. I mean, it's smaller countries uh, are generally more stable and mellow because, well, what you just pointed out, people all tend to know each other for one thing, and that helps. And there's not lots of disparate groups located 1,000 miles away that you have no relationship with, that you're all competing for favors from the government from. Yeah, smaller is better when it comes to political entities. So yeah, Uruguay's got a lot going for it.
Okay. Doug, you often talk about how instead of having gold-backed currencies, we should be using gold directly. So have you heard of Goldbacks, which are actual gold in a form more compatible to be used as a medium of exchange? Essentially, they're bills, that are like gold leafed, I guess, and they have a particular weight of gold in them. Have you seen these things?
There have been a number of those things over the years. I'm not familiar, maybe I am familiar with it, with I may own some of the things and just put them away and forgot about them. I suspect they're like plasticine money, which doesn't tear or
Yeah,
which,
exactly.
yeah, and it's got some gold that's integrated into it. And a great idea. I mean, look, money should not be a function of the state anyway, quite frankly, and we should just use gold as money. Uh, I think it's a great idea. Will it catch on? Uh, well, if if the Trump administration winds up destroying the dollar over the next few years, which I think is their intention, whether they admit it or not, yeah, maybe it'll get some traction. I hope so.
Yeah, I think the downside of actually they're very beautiful. They have some really interesting, special notes that they make that are really nice. But the premiums are really high, as you might imagine, to be able to get a tiny amount of gold in a usable form. So the premiums are really, really high. And honestly, I think it'll all be circumvented ultimately by blockchain-based stuff instead, where basically on your phone, it's tied to vaulted gold, and you can exchange it and make change for it, and it can be more widely available to everybody. But
I
I
think,
think they're beautiful.
I think you're right. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's nice to have physical gold in your possession, but in today's world where everybody has a cell phone and we're increasingly computerized, yeah, well, there's no reason why you can't have several different types of money that are mutually acceptable, especially in our high-tech community where prices of things are well known. They're all on your phone instantaneously. So you could use Bitcoin, or you could use gold in that form, or you could use gold coins if you wished. I mean, it's whatever the market accepts for money. And I think it's going to boil down to gold and Bitcoin, frankly. And most of it'll be electronic. Nothing wrong with that, although I like gold in physical possession. It's funny, when I was in Zimbabwe, and it wasn't the last time I was in Zimbabwe, I've been there and in Rhodesia numerous times. We were meeting with all these high government officials, and I had one of these, maybe it was a Goldback, I don't know, with some plasticine gold currency. And I was uh, showing these ministers, I mean, this is what you guys should be using for money instead of the toilet paper that the Zim dollar is. And, they gave it to the minister and he examined it and he put it in his pocket. He stole it from me. He liked it. He liked the idea. And Gideon Gono, who was the Secretary of the Treasury around the central bank, spent a lot of time with him. He's the one whose name, if you look, is on the $100 trillion Zimbabwe bill. He wrote a paper and he gave it to me that he was trying to convince Bob Mugabe that Zimbabwe should use gold. So stranger things have happened in the world.
Next question says, I love the idea of having a second home in a different part of the world, acquiring another passport and citizenship, but at the age of 65, is it worth the effort?
When I was 65, I couldn't play polo anymore. So I thought the world was coming to an end, frankly, because your body starts falling apart when you're 65, quite frankly. And people don't realize that back in the 1930s, when they started Social Security, you retired at 65, but half of the people were dead by 65. Only half the people lived to 65. But hey, listen, I'm 78 now. I don't know how long I'll live. At the meeting I went to last night that I mentioned, the roundtable with all these, international successful guys, guy I was sitting to from England in Buenos Aires here, he was 93 and perfectly hale and hearty. My answer to the question is this, is that with advances in medical technology proceeding apace, which they are, 65 could turn out to be the new 45 in a few years. And especially if things fall apart in the US and in Europe and the world, which is quite possible. Don't forget, morning in America has come, but morning only lasts 6 hours. So when whatever happens with Trump, whether it's his fault or not, blows up, foreign exchange controls and so forth, answer to the question, yeah, do it now. You're not too old. And now's a great time to come to Buenos Aires. I mean, this is the place to be. Other than the Orient, I'm still very partial to the Orient.
All right. Well, Doug, you've lived in both Argentina and in Uruguay. Obviously, you're in Buenos Aires now, but I think last time we talked or the time before you were in Uruguay. So what do you like better about living in Argentina and what do you prefer about living in Uruguay?
Well, Argentina is much more vibrant, much more sophisticated. And Uruguay is not. Like I said earlier, it's Kansas with an attached beach resort, as far as I'm concerned. So, and if you want to come down here and become a citizen, though, this is something relating to the previous question. It's that right now, Argentina offers one of the easiest and cheapest paths to citizenship of any country in the world. You can become a citizen in 2 years, and you only have to live in Argentina half of the time for 2 years. I mean, that's great. And it's a great passport, and it's going to become better. Probably visa-free travel to the US if things keep going the way they are, and visa-free travel almost everywhere. And nobody hates other South Americans hate the Argentines because
They really do. They really do. It's strange.
it is. But the Europeans don't care, and the Orientals don't care. So it's great. It's great being in Argentina. It's a great passport to have. Great place to buy something now. Like I said, equivalent properties are still selling for 5% of what they are in New York. 5%. That's pretty cheap.
That's really cheap. Yeah. In Uruguay, citizenship takes 3 years if you're married. And like I have my citizenship appointment next Thursday, actually. So um, yeah, it's, for me, I haven't lived in Argentina before. I like it. I completely agree. More sophisticated, the culture's more interesting. The people you're going to be exposed to, especially if you're in Buenos Aires, is definitely broader and more interesting. But to me, knowing the state of disorder that the world was going into in this phase, low volatility won over for me. I wanted to, you've got places all over. I wanted one to be my base, and Uruguay. If I was going to make one choice, it was the lower risk bet.
Yeah, and I think that's a good bet. And yeah, absolutely. So I completely agree. This is certainly the best place in Latin America, and one of the best places in the world, quite frankly.
I agree. And get from Punta to Buenos Aires on a 51-minute flight. So it's close and accessible. If you want a big city, you can have it from Uruguay. Or if you want a farm in a low volatility place, or a beach or town, or sorry, a condo and a beach resort, you split the time between the two, like lots of Argentines do.
Yeah, and culturally, in Uruguay, they just liberalized the law a couple 3 years ago, whatever it was. Uh, you used to be able to own 5 guns. Now you can own 8 guns in Uruguay. In Argentina, there's no limit at all. So there's some pluses in
Positive.
this part of the
Yeah,
world.
definitely. Definitely. Okay, so next question. Doug has consistently suggested that the US and other nations will break up. I mean, you mentioned it earlier today about Europe. How does this breaking up into smaller pieces correlate with the push to consolidate power through a technocratic global governance model, meanwhile promoting multiculturalism in all those nations?
I think that was a passing fantasy on the part of the kind of people that go to the World Economic Forum and the kind of people that populate the United Nations and all these other organizations like the OECD. I don't think it's going to work. And in fact, because of the computer revolution, on the one hand, it's making it possible for governments to have a panopticon and monitor everybody all the time. Okay, that's one possibility. The other possibility is that now, because of the internet, uh, our countrymen can be anybody that we share values with anywhere in the world. We're not just limited like medieval serfs to one physical jurisdiction. So it's kind of the race is on, and either can happen. But notwithstanding my current financial views and economic views, it's that I'm an optimist at heart, and I think the ascent of man will continue, and it will be in the form of more personal freedom and more individualism over the long run. So,
And it'll be enabled by technology.
and it'll be because technology has always liberated the individual. I can't emphasize this enough. It's like when gunpowder arrived on the scene in Europe in the 1400s. Well, the people that got it first were the people that controlled the state, and they used it to dominate the peasants. But after a while, it filtered down, and then the peasants could shoot an armored knight, which they couldn't really do anything about in the past. So it turned the tables. And when the printing press was invented, I mean, that was a piece of technology that the elite really didn't like at all. It led to the Protestant Revolution and the average guy being able to elevate himself and educate himself. No, listen, as little respect as I have for humanity in general, as opposed to individual people, uh, I think that things are going to get better, and I'm optimistic. And there's lots of trends going on today. that the fact that, do you know that in Korea, the latest numbers are that the average woman only has not the 2.2 kids or 2.1 kids that is needed to maintain the population. In Korea, it's only 7/10 of a kid. Korea is going to cease to exist in 100 years. And the same is true in Japan and China and Europe. I mean, it's only Africa south of the Sahara and the Mohammedan world where people are still reproducing. I mean, this is a really big time bomb, and it's going to be accentuated by the robot revolution aided by AI, where we're all going to have our own individual terminators, hopefully friendly terminators, but they're going to be super athletes, super smart, walking around like robots. And then pretty soon they're going to be covered in skin-like material. So they'll be, look, the whole world is going to change radically. I think it's going to be actually in the next couple of years. I mean, it's right on top of us. And I don't think anybody's even talking about it. Am I right? Or
think
is
it's,
it
I think
a
it's
space patrol I'm going on?
no, I think you're totally right, and I think it's just so difficult for people to imagine that this is right that we're right on the cusp of this radical change because we look at the past to determine what the near future will be like, and I just think that with the the speed of technological advancement today, and you add that to like this huge manufacturing capacity because of technology that exists today in China, led by China. But that manufacturing, these automated manufacturing that's there will be built in the U.S. and other places. That our ability to be able to produce these technologies, to produce robots, basically, they can do these things. It's really really big. I mean, really big. Uh, Tesla's going to have their Optimus robot. They hope that they'll have 10,000 of them produced this year. And that's just like kind of their beginning trial run. But these things, they'll be producing by the millions.
By the middle. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's gonna change. This is gonna change everything. You're not gonna have to import, a low life labor to do things. The robots will be able to do things. I mean, soon. Not we're not talking in the distant future. We're talking like now.
Right. I mean, the US manufactures something like 10,000 vehicles a year, 10,000 vehicles. I'm sorry, 10 million vehicles a year. It's the manufacturing of these robots will be much simpler than it is to manufacture a car. So the manufacturing capacity is there and the productivity increases produced by these things will be so massive that it will be ramped up. And I mean, I don't, China produces 30 million cars a year. Imagine if that gets directed somewhere else, to these robots. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it will be. It's absolutely going to be wild. And you're right. Nobody's talking about it. Just like nobody's talking about the fact the goal's at 3,000. And
Right. It's right before us. So there's a lot of reasons to be out there. And I know people can be afraid of Terminator, bad robots that enslave people. I think I get it. Like I understand that dystopian inclination. I kind of have that inherent, I think, in my thinking too. But as on this ranch I have, I can imagine if I had the things that I would do on this property, if I had a couple of robots to help me do it, I would just build cooler things. I would do way more interesting things because I could. Like it's so there's all this untapped productivity gain, to make this place more profitable, but also to make it more beautiful that I would do if I had this resource I could use for it. So I mean, I'm going to sign up early for these things.
yeah, for sure. They'll be expensive in Uruguay because, of course, the government makes progress more expensive. But I might buy one when I go back to the U.S. this summer.
Yeah, fly it down with you as a passenger, see if you can get it through immigration on the way back. Your luggage, maybe. I don't know. All right, so just a couple more questions for you. Doug, do you think the water supply is going to be a major problem in the future, or it's going to be an asset in the future? And if so, could there be an opportunity in the southern cone for this? Because, I guess a couple of big underwater.
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about water because, listen, one of the pluses with Israel is that they really did make the desert bloom by doing things intelligently, unlike all the Muslim countries around them. So water doesn't have to be a problem. And yeah, you can do stupid things with water in places where there isn't a lot of it. Like it's well known that one of the largest reservoirs under North America, the Ogallala Reservoir, is basically being drained because farmers in the Midwest are just pumping it to grow uh, wheat and corn where they really shouldn't be grown. Uh, so don't worry about water. I mean, there's just loads and loads of water. And if nuclear power plants, fifth generation nuclear power plants are available, you'll be able to desalinate water from anywhere. But here in the Southern Cone, there's just lots and lots of water. You got the Andes Mountains that the rivers drain off of the Andes, just like they drain from the Rockies and in North America. Uh, uh, the Plate River, where we're both pretty close to, is like 120 miles wide. I mean, water's really not. It's just another one of these global eco hysterias that people like to get everybody hot and bothered about. So we need more regulations telling people that you can only have a toilet that uses 1.3 gallons to flush and stupidities like that. No, water is not a problem. It's totally manageable. There's plenty of water around.
Okay.
Where do these ideas originate? I mean, from these eco freaks. I mean, look, people say that people like us say, hey, the financial markets could collapse. Okay, great. But these people are talking about human beings who they hate collapsing the earth itself. This is total evil nonsense put out by stupid people and evil people, actually, most of them. They
That
love
seems like it's just designed to control people. That
that's
seems
all.
to go.
Yeah, they don't love the earth. They really just hate people.
I think that's right. All right. The last question, I guess we probably kind of already covered, but he says, according to Alex Craner, a friend of ours, he says that there was a deal made between the British and the Ukrainians on January 16th, right before Trump was sworn into office. And so I guess the thought is maybe that a lot of Trump's reason for the rationale for this raw earth steel or rare earth steel is was to kind of call the bluff on that or something. I don't know. Did you hear about this?
Yeah. Yeah. The Zelensky regime is supposed to have cut a deal with the Starmer regime and 100-year contract. It's all total bullshit. I mean, there, there's there's no significant mining in the Ukraine. It's an agricultural country, and almost every country in the world with some land area has mineral resources. And I guess the latest meme is that we got to cut a deal with the Ukraine for their rare. There hasn't been any drilling. There hasn't been any real proof. Yeah, sure. Rare earths are everywhere. They're not rare. The question is are they economic anywhere? And the answer is not usually. Look, is it true that the Ukraine is a cornucopia of mineral resources? No, it's not. If you want a cornucopia of mineral resources, look at Russia. Gigantic land area, just loaded with all kinds of things, but it's not economic to take them out. Same problem with Ukraine. My backyard, I could say I've got $1 trillion of minerals in my backyard, and it's true because in just a cubic meter of dirt, I've got some every one of the 92 naturally occurring elements, all of them. And in my backyard, I've probably got $1 trillion worth of them. If you could break them all down atom by atom and separate them into discrete quantities, and if it's not under the first yard of topsoil, well, we can go down 100 yards or 1,000 yards, or actually we can go all the way to the center of the earth. But it's not economic. This is all crazy. These people come up with these bullshit concepts, and then reporters who are looking for something exciting to talk about repeat them, and everybody believes it because they heard about it. It's all nonsense. It's ridiculous. And anyway, Zelensky's hopefully going to wind up in jail, and I'd like to see Starmer in jail too. It's all nonsense.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I think you told me once, like you're talking about in ocean water, right? That basically you can take uranium and gold and I mean anything out of ocean water.
Absolutely every element is in ocean water. So it's just a question of how cheaply you can, which is basically an energy problem, you can process ocean water and retrieve all of the elements that are dissolved in ocean water, because everything is dissolved in ocean water. So it's just a question of having the power and the technology. Not a problem.
All right, good. Well, I think we'll wrap it up here, Doug. We'll be back next week with more. So thank you very much.
Okay, have a good weekend, Matt.
Yeah, you too, Doug. Bye-bye.